All right, this lesson, lesson 84, should be a little bit, makes you think a little bit, but it's not too difficult. Algebraic terms. We know that algebraic terms is when we're dealing with any kind of variable. So let's take a look at it. A monomial is one term. Mono means one, so the example is just 2x. There's just one term there. Binomial is two terms. The example, a squared minus 4b squared. There's two terms, 1, 2. And then a trinomial, triangle, trinomial, three terms. 3x squared minus x minus 4. Every term contains a positive or negative number and possibly one or more variables. So as you see here, we have one variable, and so on and so forth. Do you see here there's no variable? That's okay. Right here, there's no number, but really we have a 1, because there's always an invisible 1 in front of every variable. So we'll look at it a little bit more. Next. Terms are separated by a positive or negative sign. Example, 3x squared plus 4x minus 6. This is what separates terms. There's no positive or negative sign here, so this is just one term, even though there's like a lot involved in it. It's not a new term unless there's a positive or negative sign in between them. And then a term with no variable is called a constant, because obviously these numbers that are coming up very shortly, 2, -4, 3, and 7, those values never change. 2 is always 2. -4 is always -4. 3 is always 3, and 7 is always 7. So that's why they're called constants, because they don't change. But x, that's constant, constantly. That's always changing. X could be 7, 4, -7, -1000. Can you guys hear the roosters crowing sometimes? They're super loud. Here they go again. Just reminds you of being at school, doesn't it? It's great. All right, so these are constants because they never change. Those values are always where they are. But the rest with x's and y's and b's, those are variables. Let's move on to some examples. So this is terminology. Here we go. Like terms, that means that they are alike. They have the same variables, identical variables. They don't have to have the same number, but they have to have identical variables. So, -3xy squared and 1xy squared, they both have xy squared. So those are like terms. If this one didn't have the y squared, those would not be the same anymore, right? So be very careful. You can't put stuff together that doesn't have the same exact variables. If there's no variables in either of them, like 4 plus 3, we've been doing that since kindergarten, that's 7. But now we're introducing the fact that sometimes they have x's or y's or b's or whatever. So let's move on. Here's our first example. 3x plus y plus x minus y. And we'll see what our first step is. Our first step is just to put ones in front of all those lonely variables. The ones that are all alone, we're just going to put ones in front of them so it's easier for us to add or subtract. So 1y, 1x, -1y. Next, commutative property. That means put the x's by the x's and the y's by the y's. And the biggest thing about this is that the sign goes with the term. This is not just plus 1y. This is a positive 1y. So when we move them around, make sure we take the positive or negative with it, because you can't just abandon the sign. So 3x plus 1x, and then we have a plus 1y and a minus 1y. And then our next step, oh, that was the thing I just told you. The sign is attached to the term. So the next step is to just add them together. If I have a 3x and a 1x, that becomes 4x. 1y and a -1y, 1 minus 1 is 0. We don't even need that. So it's just 4x. And that's it. It's just a matter of getting familiar with it. Example 2. Now we're adding squares. Squares are not the same as not squares. They're their own little thing. The x cannot go with the x squared. It has to be x squares with x squareds, x's with x's, and so on and so forth. So don't think, well, they're both x's, because they're not really. Because x squared is represented by, if this is 3, that's 9, because 3 squared is 9. And over here, it would just be 3. So I don't want to get too deep into it. Just be careful not to put the x's and the x squareds together. First step, add those ones where we need them. I'm sorry, I'm left-handed, probably blocking things. But afterwards, put everything together. So the x squareds came together, positive 2x squared, positive 1x squared, and then the 3x, and the minus 1x. Remember, we took that minus with it, and then the 4 and the minus 1. And then all we got to do is add like terms. So 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 minus 1 is 2, 4 minus 1 is 3. And then this is it. Everybody wants to like put them together and do 5x squared or 8 or whatever. You can't, because these are not the same thing. So it's fine to have a long answer like that. It says to simplify. Simplify just means make it as simple as possible. We can't make it any simpler unless suddenly they told us what x was. So that's it. I guess that's the end. Is that the end? All right, sorry, that's the end of the lesson. That's the last example. Good luck with your homework.